She was the woman who taught America how to fold a napkin into a bishop's mitre. She was the first self-made female billionaire in the history of the United States. And then, she was inmate number 55170 at Alderson Federal Prison camp. How do you go from the cover of Fortune magazine to a prison jumpsuit, and then somehow, impossibly, end up on the cover of Sports Illustrated Swimsuit Edition at the age of 81? It is not a story of redemption. Redemption implies you are sorry. It implies you came back to a place you once occupied. This is something far more rare. This is a pivot, not just a business pivot, a psychological pivot. A brand pivot so violent and so complete that it rewired the very definition of what it means to be Martha Stewart. The world thought she was one thing, a patrician goddess of the domestic arts. A perfectionist whose smile seemed to hold the secret to the perfect souffle and the proper way to prune a hydrangea. And when she fell, and by God she fell hard, the world waited for the obituary, not the literal one, the cultural one. The one that writes off a powerful woman as a cautionary tale. That obituary was written, it was edited, it was fact-checked. And then Martha Stewart took a pair of pinking shears and cut it into confetti and threw it in the air at a party with Snoop Dogg. But to understand how that happened, we have to go back before the billions, back before the barter deals, back to a little girl in New Jersey who learned that if you wanted something to be beautiful, you had to make it that way yourself. Because no one was going to hand it to you. That is the foundation. That is the concrete upon which the empire of chintz and chamomile was built, and it is the same concrete that would eventually, metaphorically speaking, be used to build the wall of a very different kind of enclosure. The story of Martha Stewart is a masterclass in perception, and the single greatest question of her life, the question that hangs in the air like the scent of her famous lemon madeleines. Was she a monster of ambition who got what she deserved, or was she a woman who played by the rules of a man's game and got punished for winning too hard? The answer is not in the court documents. The answer is in the silence. The silence between the clink of the silverware and the sound of the gavel. Martha Helen Castira, born in 1941, Jersey City, that matters, it's not the Hamptons. It's not the rolling hills of Connecticut she would later curate into a lifestyle fantasy. It was a working-class family of Polish heritage. There were 8 children. 8. Imagine the noise, imagine the chaos, imagine the sheer amount of laundry in that crucible of controlled chaos. Martha learned 2 things. Number 1, how to cook for a crowd. Number 2, how to stand out. She was the one who arranged the platter with a sprig of parsley when no one else cared. She was the one who noticed the seam on the pillowcase was crooked. Her father was a pharmaceutical salesman and a perfectionist, a hard man, a critical man. A man who, according to Martha, taught her that anything worth doing was worth doing to the point of exhaustion. He would inspect her work. He would find the flaw. She learned to anticipate the flaw. That is the engine. That drive to eliminate the mistake before anyone sees it. That is the engine that built a billion-dollar corporation. And that is the exact same engine that would eventually drive everyone around her completely insane. Because living inside a Martha Stewart magazine spread is lovely for a weekend. Living inside Martha Stewart's brain for 40 years. That is a different kind of sentence. She wasn't just good at one thing, she was a polymath of domesticity. She modeled in her teens and early 20s. Right there, that's the first crack in the just a housewife narrative. She stood next to Richard Nixon. She was in a Terratin cigarette ad. She was beautiful in that classic, symmetrical, don't mess with me way. She made money on Wall Street. She was a stockbroker. Think about that. Martha Stewart in the pit. Martha Stewart understanding leverage and short positions before she understood the tensile strength of twine for tying a crown roast. That is the part of the resume that people forget. She saw how money worked. She saw how men made money. She saw how they lost it. She married a man named Andrew Stewart. He was in publishing. They moved to Westport, Connecticut. They bought an old farmhouse on Turkey Hill Road, and this is where the myth begins. She stripped the paint off the old beams herself. She dug the garden beds herself. She was not playing house. She was building a fortress of aesthetic certainty, and while she was doing it, she started a catering business in the basement with a partner. She would show up to a party with a basket of just-picked raspberries and a quiche so light it seemed to float. She wasn't just feeding people. She was seducing them with an idea, the idea that this beautiful, orderly, delicious life was attainable. If only you followed her instructions to the letter. And then came the book. Entertaining, 1982. It is not an overstatement to say this book changed the American consciousness. Before entertaining, a dinner party was a wedge salad and a rib roast on a faded tablecloth. After entertaining, it was an event, it was a stage. She showed us the life we didn't know we wanted, and she showed it to us with photographs so crisp you could smell the thyme. And the thing about Martha, the thing that made her different from Julia Child or Betty Crocker, was that Martha was in the frame. She wasn't just a set of hands. She was the star, she was the avatar of the good life. She was the one driving the tractor in the snow to feed the horses. She was the one standing in the perfect greenhouse with the perfect complexion. She was the promise and the product all rolled into one, and she knew it. She understood branding before branding was a buzzword. Martha Stewart was the brand, not the magazine, not the paint color, her, the face, the voice, the specific, clipped, slightly imperious tone that could make you feel like an idiot for buying pre-shredded cheese. That voice, it was a weapon, it was a shield. And it was a liability waiting to detonate. She launched Martha Stewart Living Omnimedia. 1999, the timing was perfect. The dot-com bubble was inflating. The IPO made her a billionaire on paper. The stock price soared. She was the empress of everything. She had Kmart. She had the television show. She had the magazine. She had the sheets. She had the towels. She had a daily television show filmed in her actual home, which meant her actual kitchen had to be show-ready every single day of her actual life. That is not a life, that is a diorama, and she was the most famous businesswoman in the world, but fame, and especially female fame, is a currency that the public loves to devalue. The public built her up because she represented control. We wanted to be her because we felt out of control, and then, we wanted to tear her down because her control made us feel inadequate, and that is the tinder upon which the fire of her destruction was laid. The stock trade, ImClone. December 27th, 2001. This is where the story gets dense and where the perception fractures. She sold roughly 3,928 shares of ImClone Systems stock, a day before the FDA rejected the company's cancer drug application. Causing the stock to plummet, her broker, Peter Bakanovic, had a standing order to sell if it dropped below $60. The problem, and this is the $400,000 question, was whether she was tipped off that the CEO of ImClone, her friend Sam Waxel, was trying to dump his own shares. The government said she was. She said she had a standing stop-loss order. They didn't believe her. They didn't believe her because her assistant, a young woman named Ann Armstrong, changed her story. She changed her logbook entry, and that ink erasure, that tiny physical act of alteration, became the smoking gun that brought down the empire. But here is what the audio record will never capture. The smell of the public mob. They didn't go after her for insider trading. Not really. The Securities and Exchange Commission case was about insider trading. That was civil, the criminal case. The one that sent her to prison, it was about lying to investigators, obstruction of justice, making false statements. She was convicted of covering up a crime that the jury wasn't even sure she committed in the first place. That is a sentence with more twists than a French knot. She was found guilty of conspiracy, obstruction of an agency proceeding, and making false statements to federal investigators. Not insider trading. Lying, the government, in its infinite wisdom, decided that Martha Stewart needed to be made an example because she was Martha Stewart, because she was rich, because she was a woman who had made a lot of men feel very small at dinner parties with her perfect linen napkins. The sentencing, July 16th. 2004, she stood in front of the judge. Her hair was perfect, her suit was perfect, she looked defiant. She was sentenced to 5 months in prison, 5 months in a federal camp, plus 5 months of home confinement. She could have run. She could have hidden, she could have apologized in a way that pleased the mob. She didn't. She took the microphone on the courthouse steps and she said, and I quote, "I have been choked and almost suffocated to death during the long attempt to charge and convict me." Choked, she used that word. She didn't say, "I made a mistake." She said she was choked. She went to war with the United States government in a beige blazer. And she lost that battle, but she was about to win a war that no one saw coming. Alderson Federal Prison Camp, West Virginia, inmate number 55170. She arrived in a drizzle. She was photographed from a helicopter. The paparazzi were waiting in the trees. They wanted the shot of the broken woman. They wanted Martha Stewart without makeup. Martha Stewart in khaki. Martha Stewart humiliated. They got the shots, but they didn't get the story they wanted because Martha Stewart did not break. She worked in the ceramics room. She cleaned the administration building. She took up yoga. She taught other inmates how to make tamales and how to start a small business. She ate the vending machine food and she lost weight. And when she walked out of that place, she did not slink. She walked out wearing a poncho knitted by a fellow inmate, a poncho, the ultimate act of domestic defiance. She turned the prison uniform into a symbol of resilience. The world was waiting for a shadow instead. They got a phoenix wearing a hand-knit shawl, and that is the pivot. That is the moment the brand changed from Martha Stewart living to Martha Stewart surviving and thriving. But you cannot just come back. You cannot just reappear on television and say, "I'm back, let's make a pie." The world had changed, the internet had changed, irony had taken over, we were in the age of snark, and Martha Stewart, the old Martha, was the queen of sincerity. She had to find a new tone, she had to find a new frequency, and she found it in the most unlikely of places. A satirical awards show and a bag of pot. It was the Comedy Central roast of Justin Bieber, 2015. Martha Stewart walked out on stage. She was 73 years old, she had a glass of vodka, and she said, "Justin, you're the son I wish I never had." The room went silent for a beat, and then it exploded. And then she started talking about baking, and then she started talking about other things, and the world saw it. She was in on the joke, she had always been in on the joke. We just weren't sure if she had a sense of humor about herself. She did. She had a dark, dry, cutting wit that had been hiding behind a perfectly arranged cheese board. The prison sentence didn't humble her. It liberated her. She didn't have to be perfect anymore, because the worst had already happened. She had been fingerprinted and put in a cell. After that, what else is there to be afraid of? A bad review of your roast chicken recipe. Who cares? Enter Snoop Dogg. It seems like a gimmick now. It is a gimmick now. But it is the most brilliant gimmick in the history of modern media. They met on her show, she made mashed potatoes. He was confused, but they clicked, it was real, it wasn't just a PR stunt. It was two people who are absolute 100% unapologetically themselves. He is a former gang member who loves gin and juice. She is a former inmate who loves gin and fresh juice from her own orchard. They are the same person in different fonts, and their show, Martha and Snoop's Potluck Dinner Party, it was not just a hit, it was a cultural realignment. It gave Martha Stewart a new audience. It gave her the one thing her brand had never had before: credibility, street cred, not because she was pretending to be cool, because she was not pretending, she was just Martha. She was the grandma who has the best stories and also knows where to get the best weed. And the thing is, she didn't change who she was. She didn't put on a hoodie and start using slang. She still said it's a good thing. She still corrected people's knife skills. She just did it while sitting next to a man who calls himself the Dogfather. That is the pivot. The pivot wasn't changing the product. The pivot was changing the container. The content was still good things. The context was now no filter. And then came the thirst traps, the pool selfies, the Sports Illustrated swimsuit cover at 81 years old looking like that, and this is where the narrative comes full circle. The media tried to frame this as age is just a number or you go girl. But that is reductive. That is the wrong lesson. The lesson is this: she is not trying to be young, she is not trying to be 25. She is showing you what 81 looks like when you have spent 50 years eating your own organic vegetables and standing on your feet for 14 hours a day gardening. It is the ultimate product demonstration. She is the proof of concept. She is the walking, talking, swimming embodiment of the Martha Stewart lifestyle, and she is doing it with a smirk because she knows. She knows that the same people who tore her down 20 years ago are now buying her CBD gummies and double tapping her bikini photos. She won. Not by fighting the system, by outlasting it, by staying so relentlessly, stubbornly herself that the world finally bent to her will. So what is the secret? What is the thing she knows that we don't? It is this: she doesn't separate Martha the person from Martha the brand. There is no off switch, there is no sweatpants at home persona. It is all one thing. That is exhausting to contemplate, but it is also invincible because you cannot cancel someone who has no secret self to be exposed. She already did the crime. She already did the time, and she came out and baked a bundt cake on live television. She is a survivor, but more than that, she is a reminder that the public's memory is short, a reminder that talent, real, undeniable talent for making things beautiful and delicious, is a harder currency than any stock tip, and a reminder that sometimes the best way to regain control is to let go of the illusion that you ever had it in the first place. She lost everything she built on paper, and in losing it, she found a version of herself that was bulletproof. The napkin is still folded perfectly. It's just that now, the napkin is sitting next to a bag of flammin' hot Cheetos, and somehow. That is the most Martha Stewart thing of all. The story of Martha Stewart is not a rise and fall. It is a rise and a recalibration. She didn't climb back up the same mountain. She realized that mountain was boring. She built a new one. One with a better view and a hot tub and maybe a little bit of Snoop's special brownie mix in the pantry. She was the woman who taught us how to live, and then she taught us how to survive, and in the end, that might be the only lesson worth folding into a perfect crease. She is still here, she is still working, and she is still, unapologetically, Martha, and that is a good thing.